So we're back for another Embodied Love Lounge episode.
Got quite the episode today.
This one is edgy. It's going to be about fisting and in relationship to extended orgasm. So let's just jump in. What can you tell us? What is fisting?
Well, fisting is when you place an entire hand or fist into another person's orifice. It could be the anus, it could be the vagina, it could be the mouth. In this case, though, we're going to be talking about vaginal fisting.
Okay, great. And what about extended orgasm?
Well, first of all, fisting does not mean that you're punching into a person, though. It just means that the hand
we'll
is
get
going
into a description. It's really not what we think. I actually don't like the word fisting. I think it doesn't really represent what's happening, but we'll get into that in a moment. And the extended orgasm.
Well, you go ahead and talk about that one.
Okay, well, it's an orgasm that lasts more than a few fleeting moments. It can last literally 4 hours, and it doesn't have a lot of peak moments. It has valleys and it has soft peaks maybe, but it just keeps going and going and going and going, and it's quite a remarkable state to be in. I think it sounds like it's an alien experience, but really it's not. There's ways that you can touch the body and breathe and induce extended orgasms. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today.
So kind of where this kind of traditional peak orgasm has its very strong crescendo, and then you sort of do not want to be stimulated for a while or can't be stimulated for a while. The extended orgasm does not have that sense of overwhelm in the sense of I can't be touched anymore. It's more like a state change or trance-like state, almost going to be more like a psychedelic type of state. So it could get so intense that you would want it to stop, but as opposed to having it wanting to be stopped because you're being tickled, this would be more, wow, these waves just keep getting stronger and stronger. When's it going to end? Maybe then you would want to. So it is a slightly different experience.
But I also want to be clear, extended orgasm doesn't keep going up in a peak. There are valleys.
Yes.
So it's a journey, and you just never break out of the orgasmic experience. It maintains itself, whether it softens or starts to heighten.
Yeah, well, that's what I kind of describe more as like an altered state or a trance.
But it's definitely specifically orgasmic.
Yes, and it's sensational.
It's definitely sensational. So let's look at the myths. Because what we discovered, at least it was a first experience for me, which we'll talk about in the explicit part of the podcast, but there's this idea that if you stick too many things in a vagina, or even a bigger item in the vagina, that it's going
many times.
It's going to be stretched out and then become loose and never actually regain its shape.
Yes, well, that's false.
Clearly it's false. But there is a myth around that. I mean, we, I think, did a podcast on tight vaginas, and there's this myth that, you just can't have sex too often, and definitely not with larger penises or dildos.
Or for some reason, if you do it with different people versus the same one, there's like this shaming that you'll become a slut, and therefore you'll be loose.
Slut equals loose?
Okay. That's some of the myth, unfortunately.
Okay. So
not true again.
Not true. And then another idea, if you put things that are too large in the body, that it can really hurt and injure the body, which is actually can be true if you're not using care. But there's amazing ways. The body is so versatile, and if you treat the body well, it's incredible what the body can do.
And that's the point, is that if you have sex in a way that is good and for the body, it's going to be rewarded. So in the same way, if you use a finger, a fist, a whatever, in a way that is actually good for the body and bringing it into states of pleasure and not causing pain or scar tissue or tearing and damage, then this is good for you. Just know that. Like, it is inherently good for you.
So that's some of the benefits of really good sexual experience.
But there's this myth that the more good sexual experiences you have, then it's actually somehow bad for you. especially if you are
Really?
a woman, because then, everything starts to kind of like fall apart or get
Oh
looser,
gosh. Okay.
etc.
If that's the case, I should be like a little pile of rubble somewhere. So some of the benefits to this, the fisting with extended orgasm experience, vaginal fisting, what would that be for the person who's giving?
Well, I mean, you really get to learn the inner landscape of your partner. You really do need to be present with them. So it's an excellent practice in both learning to be more present, but also to having that experience, that intimate experience of sharing presence for that extended period of time with a partner where you are so focused on one another, every little move, reading each person's breath and just following and being in communication with one another. It's a massive skill learning. Now, I would also say too that that's the kind of the fisting side of it. The extended orgasm side, as you start to really learn how your partner's pleasure can be extended for periods of time, you start to learn to really work with the patterns or the natural rhythms of the other person's body,
Yes.
as opposed to trying to force an orgasm or cause something to happen. And then as opposed to just making it happen, you actually are staying in that flow. So it's kind of the difference between making someone stand up out of a seat and actually dancing with them.
Okay. Yeah, I like that. I also really feel one of the benefits is a deepening of trust between the two, because it takes a lot to be willing to open your body in that way.
Yeah.
So there has to be a foundation of trust. And when it's done well, I think that trust gets amplified and solidified. And I'm imagining for the giver, if someone's trusting you in that way, it's also building a sense of connection.
Yes. I mean, if we're talking about after effects, there's definitely the trust that comes in. There's a softening of your partner. You just have to get very open and just cuddly and wanting to be held and be close. The other thing too, though, is the softening isn't just on a kind of like emotional, relational softening or attitude and psychology. There's a physical softening where when you take, again, because fisting isn't about getting the fist in, it's about getting the body to open up so much to the extent that even the fist could go in. And when the body opens up to that extent, the aliveness of the tissues, the ability for the vagina to interact, to lubricate, to have plush, thick, vaginal, engorged walls is phenomenally sensational.
Oh, sounds good. But let's address this real quick, because I know some listeners, maybe this is their first episode, they haven't listened to our other stuff where we do answer some of these questions. So just really quickly, tight vaginas are the thing. So why would I want a soft one, right? This is the idea in the collective. So the tighter, the better. So you just said things soften. Like why is that a good thing?
Well, if you had the option between a nice, tight, squeezing hand or a soft, sucking mouth, what do you choose? And
I guess it depends on your kink.
I guess it depends on your kink there. Maybe you like that kind of death grip and the roughness there. But this idea that, and this is really what it gets down to, like being serious now again, is that tightness comes from squeezing muscles and being very small. Well, if you have tense muscles and you also have a very small orifice, and then all of a sudden now the ideal is to go ahead and put in a big hard cock, that's a recipe for, or a big fist. Like this is a recipe for disaster. I mean, if it's tight, it's more likely to tear. If it's tight, it's not actually able to respond. If it's tight, it cannot stretch. If it's tight, I mean, like there's lots of things. So we have this word there because we feel that the word small and tight means more sensation because there's more friction on the skin. But that level of friction could also start a fire. I mean, you don't want to go ahead and have
Like
sandpaper
those ancient,
or
fire starters.
yeah, exactly. Now the alternative to that, and when I talk about soft or succulent or plush, these things, or swollen even, this is very different. This means, as opposed to muscle constriction, it is blood flow that has come in and caused everything to fill up with blood. And it's that blood that means there's more oxygen there, which means that the person that is engorged on the receiving side is going to receive more pleasure, because then with the added oxygen, it's going to send the signals to the nerves to signal pleasure. You're also, with the added blood flow, going to have a lot more lubrication, which is going to make the walls soft and
Pliable.
at the same time pliable. Also, it's going to make everything be able to slip and slide. And that engorgement, that added swelling, creates then a suction seal. It's the difference between, if you just took your lips and pressed around your finger, or squeezed with your hands and then were to pull back and forth on your finger, you can get a certain level of sensation. But if you put your finger in your mouth and you involve your tongue and your inner cheeks on the sucking, or even if you were to put your hands underwater and then start to use the hand to squeeze your other finger, you would feel that there's this added sensation, because that water, that liquid between the two surfaces form a suction seal, which all of a sudden now means that, as opposed to a few pressure points that are being squeezed into, the whole surface is getting stimulated at once. And then you can really start to play with and boost sensations. Doesn't mean that then friction per se is gone, but it's not where you're orienting yourself
Right.
around.
And all of the work that we're doing is involving your technology, Suction Sex, and how does two body parts start to create that suction seal. That's really important. I think in the more explicit part of this podcast, we're going to really get into what happened in the different areas as things form those seals and all of that. But for now, what's the lay of the land in terms of, if you're going to begin, we'll do more of the how-to in the second half, but just a little bit, like, what are some really important things to start off with if you were going to lean in the direction of fisting an extended orgasm experience?
Well, first of all, is making sure that you have the time.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. Don't rush this. I think it was 7 or 8 hours. We took a day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it was kind of the first even hour or so had nothing to do with even like going inside the vagina. And then the whole fisting thing didn't start somewhere until like maybe after 3 or 4 hours. And also, you're not doing Superman punches. Like, these are not, it's not about going in and out and punching with your fist.
It's not a boxing match.
Yes, exactly. So I think some of the things that you're going to want to be able to do is make sure that you, 1, have the time.
You have to be comfortable.
2, yes, find like a comfortable place. 3, you want to be extremely hydrated, and not overly fed, like with too much food.
And not on like really activating substances like sugars and
caffeine.
Yeah.
Exactly. So you want to be able to relax, and whatever you can do to set up the environment for that. The other thing is,
we went outside, didn't we?
Yeah.
We were naughty in the forest.
And then another thing that you're going to kind of want to do as well is being able to be really present with your partner. And that doesn't mean just having some eye contact. It means the ability to actually like breathe together, because when you do that, you're going to have a much better read off of when someone's system might feel some pain or not.
Yeah.
And this is important for both sides, that you don't override each other. And what I mean by that is more the person on the giving side, that they don't try and push and get the other person to bear through to just accomplish to get in that other finger or the other knuckle or whatever else it is. And on the receiving side, that you're also not just trying to like
power
through like to then get to satisfy the other person to make sure that they can go ahead and get their fist inside you. Like,
yeah, there's no reward for damaging the body.
No, there's not.
You want to leave this experience in a better place, and that's actually something we discovered. There was an impact weeks afterwards.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that I think is one of the things that you can look at is after this experience, are you physically able and mentally willing to be with your partner? If the answer is yes to that, then that means you did not cause physical damage and you did not cause, like a
emotional
havoc or disrupt the intimacy between the two of you.
Yeah.
So again, these are some of the kind of ways to judge, and we'll get into the specifics and details of how to go about this. But just in general, though, these are
I remember being scared of this idea because as a person who's instructed at a lot of different retreats, I was invited once to a leather BDSM type of retreat, and I was going to teach my little pieces there, my psychosexual pieces, and the rest of the time I was free to kind of walk around and see what was going on. And about half the things I think I left my body, like witnessing certain things, they were just too much for me. And one of those things was a fisting scene.
And left your body not in a good way? You mean, like,
no, it was not good. Like, I disassociated completely. And I was like, wow, I think I'm about 50 meters up right now, because it was too much to witness what I witnessed. And one of those was a fisting experience. And the way that it was happening, it appeared to me very violent, and I didn't like it. And I thought to myself, as a psychologist, I'm like, that looks like a reenactment of an abuse experience. Like, maybe it wasn't, and maybe it was all consensual and everyone was really happy, but from the outside, not understanding what I was seeing, it really scared me. And I want to say this now because the experience that I had with you was so beautiful and so extraordinary and life-changing, and it was a first and only experience really that I've had like that. And it was because there was this mental block. I'd had partners who tried before, and it was just not pleasant. I do tend to like girthy things, but that was too much, or maybe they were going too fast, and I put an end to that experience. However, I was pleasantly surprised with what evolved. And so I think this episode is really important because I want us to share the good ways in which you can create an exceptional experience, because the level of trust that emerged between us, the connection, the desire, the pleasure, and this kind of rippled through many weeks afterwards, including like the functioning of that part of my body was quite extraordinary. So I'm excited to share more about that soon.
Well, and I just want to kind of leave this as a last note for this, is that, again, it's not about the fisting. In fact, I had no intention or plan of going into fisting, but I did have the intention, though, as I was touching you with my hands and working with the tissues of your vagina to get them to relax, to relieve that tension and open. And they just continued to open, and then I would continue to work, and then they would continue to open more. And eventually it just felt like, oh, you would like to have more fingers, and then more fingers, and then several fingers, and then eventually you wanted to take in the whole hand. But it was, again, not about going to get the whole hand, and it was just about, oh, you're opening and you want more. And the interesting thing is that it wasn't also just linear. It wasn't one fingers, two fingers, three fingers.
It was not an addition class.
There was times where they would even be at the fisting level and then go back to one finger, or at 3 fingers and then go back to 2. And the thing that was interesting was that the amount of sensation and aliveness and suction that I was feeling from you on my hand, whether it was 1 finger or a fist, even if it was just moments apart, was the exact same.
Yeah, that was very
extreme adaptability of the vagina. Well,
let's jump into the explicit part so we can get in, because that's really juicy.